Hello, people of God. So, I'd like to share with you this another topic regarding creation and its social responsibility. So, what about the so-called social responsibility? When you talk about social responsibility, this is an ethical framework which suggests that the entity, be it in an organization, individual, has an obligation to act for the benefits of society at large. Social responsibility is a duty every individual has to perform so as to maintain balance between the economy as well as the ecosystem. So we had already a lot of discussion about the environment, about the creation of God. So now, as an individual, as a student, we have our responsibility. But remember the social responsibility. This is a framework. So it is the duty of everyone or each one of us as an individual to perform so as to maintain the balance between the economy as well as the ecosystem. And you know very well what is ecosystem, and there are a lot of kinds of the ecosystem. Then as a student, you as a student, what about your social responsibility? Every student is socially responsible for his or her actions. It is morally binding and suggests that person act in such a way minimizes the adverse effect to those immediately around them. It is a commitment everyone should have towards society, contributing towards the social, cultural, as well as ecological causes. It is also based on the individual's ethics. So therefore, as a student, remember, you have your responsibility, especially not only to others, but also to your school, to your organization, or even to our society as a whole. And of course, do not forget our social responsibility to the other creatures, particularly to our environment, the Mother Earth. So as an individual, our social responsibility as individual, this is the engagement of each person towards the community where we live, expresses interest towards what is happening in the community, as well as active participation in solving of some local problems. Every one of us could take part in the development in the different ways. For example, cleaning the streets where you live, or even cleaning the canals. Then you give donations or goods or in cash, especially to those who are poor, because that's our responsibility as individual. So once again, social responsibility does not only mean to the community, to the organization, but as well as once again to the so-called our responsibility towards God's creation. Then, it can be negative, a responsibility to refrain from acting. It can be positive, meaning there is a responsibility to act, which is proactive. Being socially responsible not only requires participating in socially responsible activities like voluntarism or volunteering or monitoring, but actually make it as a lifestyle, then only through the commitment to embrace your personal value and belief. So it can be positive, it can be negative. It's up to us. But what is reminded to all of us is to act positively, to be responsible, to act proactively. Okay? So it requires participation, like volunteering, monitoring. Okay? And it's also part of our values as a human being. Okay? There are socially least responsible activities. For example, to our environment, the reforestation. And I think in your NSTP, you went to here in our place, especially in Dimapatoy. I don't know if you plant trees, We have the program, I'm sure, the tree planting. But the problem of tree planting, after how many months, when you go back there to that place, saan na ang tree? Because there's a problem with us. We have tree planting program, but what about tree growing? Usually, pumupunta doon pag summer. Then, pagbalik mo, wala, patay. Kung may makasurvive man, that's a problem because it's only a tree planting program. It should be follow-up. There should be tree growing, not only tree planting. So, another activity that we can be responsible is the disaster relief. I think some of you are involved with this. Then, interacting with the local communities through games or sponsoring games. Okay? Another thing is promoting national heritage and culture, of course. Then, through trainings, through seminars, that's also one in which we can participate the so-called social responsibility, especially those activities. And there are a lot of activities in which you can participate in order to practice the so-called social responsibility. Then there is also the so-called social responsibility strategies. Voluntary hazard elimination. So they were talking about the bigger one. To the companies involved, social responsibility often take action to voluntarily eliminate production practices that could cause harm for the public, regardless of whether they are required by law. For example, a business could institute a hazard control program that includes steps to protect the public from the exposure of hazardous substance through education and awareness. So, yun yung matutulong sana sa company. Here in our place, we have lamsan. So, what can you observe with that industry, with that company, lamsan? Every time we pass by there, nagreklamo tayo. Air pollution, ang babaho. There are times na hindi mo matiis. So, anong ginagawa sa company? Nalilisen ba yung mga hazardous elements? Or tuloy-tuloy? Sir, wala na magreklamo sa mga tao doon na malapit. Yes, kasi nai-immune sila. But for us, na hindi taga doon. So, that's something. So, a company, to have a social responsibility to others, dapat, they have to listen that one. So, they have to look for ways and means para yung amoy, ma-listen man or mawala. Kaya nga, yung iba din, may mga poultry, may mga piggery, tapos malapit sa bahay. That's a big no-no. You have your resolution to others. Okay? Kasi ang babaho. Okay. A plant that uses chemicals could implement a safety inspection checklist to guide the staff or handling a dangerous substance and materials. A business that makes excessive noise and vibration could analyze the effects. Its work by surveying local residents. The information received could be used to adjust activities and develop soundproofing to lessen the public exposure of noise pollution. Yes, there are also companies or businesses na talagang ang ingay. And we know very well, we had already discussed the different types of pollution, one of which is the so-called the noise pollution. If I am the owner of that business, of that company, na medyo maingay, so I have to look for ways and means just to listen the noise. Kasi that's a distraction to the community. Okay? We have the so-called philanthropy. Businesses involved in philanthropy makes monetary contribution that provides aid to local charitable, education, health-related organizations to assist underserved communities. For example, the Bill and the Melinda Gates Foundation, so there's a foundation, focuses on the global initiative for education, agriculture, health issues, dominating computers to schools and funding work on the vaccines, prevent the like polio and the HIV, yung AIDS na tinatawag. So, yan, may tumutulong, mga charitable institution, tinutulungan yung the localities. Okay? So, yun yung, not only the organization, but there are also philanthropists, mga tao ito, na tumutulong to the poor, especially those who have, especially those who are wealthy. Okay. Then, social education awareness, companies that engage in social responsible positioning to exert pressure on businesses to adopt a responsible behavior themselves. To do this, they must use the media and interact distributions to expose the potentially harmful activities of organization, create educational dialogue for public by developing social community awareness. So yan yung dapat, educate the people what to do when it comes to this person, to the company, because that's their social responsibility. Okay? Educating the people, informing them, especially those hazardous elements na kung anong dapat gawin, so that they will be aware. So we have the so-called the Christian social responsibility. What about this Christian social responsibility? God created us as social beings. We live in a community and are surrounded with souls who have needs. Besides the need of salvation through Jesus, every person needs to love of true friends. Many people face times when they need a cup of cold water or a bowl of warm soap. I remember the lugaw, especially now, pandemic, walang makakain, may mga ayuda. Then, with the issue, remember the issue, this warm lugaw in which kailangan ng mga tao. A lugaw is not essential, it's non-essential. Ka-bright naman sa mga taong yun. Okay? Now, another issue now, the community pantry. Okay? Namibigay for free. Red tag agad ang mga NPA kayo ni halos ngayon the whole Philippines, because we are God's creation. As human being, we are part of it to help others, kasi that's our social responsibility, and it's not only for the Christians but all of us people of God. Okay, then the Christian responsibility challenges us to respond the needs in brotherhood, in the community, and around the world. Being both practical and godly with others is not always easy, but God gives us directives in His words. If we are serious about the following of Christ, we cannot ignore our responsibility to those around us. Yes, as Christian, but as Muslim, because there are a lot of you who are Muslims here, you have also your social responsibility to help others, especially the oppressed, the marginalized, or the poor. Take note on that. Now, during the Puasa, today, this month, the Ramadan, now, you're able to experience being poor, na walang makakain. That's one good thing. Okay? But pag walang Ramadan, pumapasok ba yung social responsibility sa iba? Mahihirap? Nagbibigay ka ba? Especially those who are asking on the streets, Ma'am, kahit na pastil, kasi gutom ako. Ma'am, biscuit. But I have to discourage you. Yes, you have responsibility, pero pag pera ang hihingiin, do not give. But pagkain, please give. Because you are a blessing to that child, to that person who are hungry when you give. Because you have your social responsibility. But once again, I'll discourage you, do not give money. Kasi you know, some of them, mga modus operandi yun. Okay? Being Christians, being Muslims, it's our responsibility to help others, especially those who are in need. Take note on that. All social responsibility, both individual and corporate, so it's only voluntary. But it's voluntary, of course. Remember, it's voluntary. But please have a sense of that. Na though it's voluntary, but still, as human being, it's your responsibility to help others, especially those who are in need. Okay? It is going above and beyond what is called by law. Legal responsibility, it also involves an idea that it is better to be proactive towards the problem rather than reactive towards the problem. Like now, once again, I have to go back to the example yung community pantry. Nung nag-initiate, majority are very reactive. The military, red tag agad, mga NPA yan sila. So ngayon, anong ginagawa na bago? Kaya nga nagjo-joke ako sa social media, anong nangyari sa mga sundalo? Anong nangyari sa mga pulis? May community pantry naman din sila. So therefore, baka member ito ng NPA. Kita natin. Kasi those who organize that community pantry, yung the sense, the voluntary na tutulong sa malong makain. Kasi alam natin wala makain ng mga tao ngayon. Kaya especially those na tangkal sa trabaho. Saan sila kukuha, magnanakaw? So here comes a free gift or a blessing. Pero na-issue din yun, no? Yung hinakot lahat. Then lumabas sila yung 4 na babae. I think it's in Makati o Manila. Nung sabi, binigay man namin doon sa mga kapitbahay namin. Pero mali ang ginawa nila. Kuha sa CCTV. Because maybe in their mind, they have a good intention to help. That's social responsibility, pero mali nga lang. Kasi the community pantry, that's intended individually. Para lahat makakain, hindi yung hakutin mo. Okay? So, yan. Now, we have the so-called harmony with nature because we have a responsibility towards nature, towards God's creation. Then people who live in union with nature is not against it. This is what God wanted. Remember, kita nyo sa drawing the IPs, the indigenous people, kasi for them, the forest, that's their university where they get foods. Kahit ano, makakain nila at doon sila nabubuhay. Kaya nga, nature lover yung ating mga kapatid na IPs. Because they feel, they think that it's also the responsibility not to destroy God's creation. Sabi ko, buti pa sila. Yung iba walang pinag-aralan pero marunong mag-alaga sa kalikasan. Tayo na may pinag-aralan, kinderapper natin, tapon kahit saan-saan. Where is now your social responsibility? Diba? Yun yung malaking problema natin. So you look at this. The nature lover, living with the animals and plants in harmony with the environment. Everywhere you go, especially in our land, we have IPs here. The Tiduray, the Manobo, the Blaan, the Tibuli, and the rest of the IPs. When you talk about those IPs, they really love God's creation, especially the forest. Kasi sabi ko nga, they get everything there na makakain. Water, food, etc., etc. Vegetables, fruits, nandoon. Kaya nga, buti pa sila. Okay? Kasi may social responsibility towards the creation of God. Now, love the world and act responsibly. Panawagan yun. This is what we should do. As Muslims, as Christians, or whatever is your religion, is your belief, whether you are an atheist or a theist or polytheist, we have our responsibility. We have to love the world and act responsibly. Okay? Now, as believer, I think even the Muslims, we believe that Adam and Eve, they sinned against God by eating the forbidden fruit. Diba? Kinain nila, yun yung turo natin. Then slowly, the perfection gave way to despair. Then the paradise was spoiled. Kasi wala na. They are not anymore in harmony with the paradise. Then dumadami ng dumadami, nasisira na yung paradise. Then responsibility increased for their own environment. Ayan. Para sa kanilang self-interest, para sa kanilang kapakanan lang, without considering God's creation. Now, papasok naman yung ignorance. Ignorance and arrogance had been part of the attitude to destroy the creation. I think you would agree with that. When Gina Lopez was the DNR secretary, mahal niyang environment. Marami siyang natulungan, maraming nasisave. Pero hindi siya na-continue dahil lahat nandoon na congressman, senators, may-ari ng mining, may-ari ng mga illegal logging. Ayaw, legal sila kasi nasa government. Ang hinuhuli lang, illegal logging, yung mga kainero, yung mga maliliit. Once again, ignorance and arrogance have been part of the attitude to destroy the environment. Sa kanila for money lang. Katulong daw sila sa environment, mga taong pobre. Pero ngayon, sirang-sira na ang mundo. Ignorance and arrogance. Then, we also know now that many cures can be found in nature. And I think noon, kahit tanungin niyo mga ninuno ninyo, kuha lang yan ng magsakit ang tiyan, kuha lang yan ng mga dahon-dahon, gumagaling tuba-tuba, nagka-dengue, kuha tawa-tawa, pero tayo, tinatawanan natin sila. But the Chinese, they really appreciate yung mga dahon-dahon. Alam natin yun. Kaya nga ngayon, we have a lot of food supplements. Ano ay, saan galing yan? Sa kalikasan. Sa mga prutas. Kita ninyo? Okay, so that's why be responsible, especially to God's creations. Then destroying the planet is not going to benefit the next generation. And that's true. Ano pang may mahinga na, may malalanghap pa nga silang hangin na malinis na hangin, hindi maruming hangin, hindi mabahong hangin, yung ating kaapu-apuhan, wala ng mga kahoy, at magmahal na rin ang hangin. Kasi oxygen, 1,000 yan. Pero pag may mga kahoy yan, wow, ang ganda ng buhay, nalalanghap mo, nararamdaman mo ang simoy ng hangin. But now, remember, pag December ngayon, wala nang simoy ng hangin. Ngayon, summer, dapat mainit. Mainit, dapat, wag summer. Pero tingnan mo ngayon, may bagyong bising. Even the temperature, hindi na alam kung ano. Sa atin, tag-init, tag-ulan, hindi na alam. Ang tag-ulan, naging tag-init, tag-init, naging tag-ulan. Kita ninyo? Dahil sinira natin ang kalikasan. Then, the destruction of the world. Today, take note, today, Christians and Muslims must act along with other religions to save the precious creation. Once again, panawagan, today, Christians and Muslims must act along with other religions to save the precious creation. May time pa. We can still save. That we have to act it now. Kahit tayo in our own little way, sabi ko nga kahit na basura man yan, put it in a proper disposal. Not everywhere. Okay? The problem for mankind is the speed with which that destruction is taking place. So, yun yung malaking problema. So, you look at that one, yung bomba, grabing destruction yan sa kalikasan. Then, if we destroy our environment, we destroy ourselves. Once again, if we destroy our environment, we destroy ourselves. I think walang kukontra dyan. Walang kukontra dyan. And that's true. And there is an American Indian saying, if you pollute your own bed, then lie in it. What does that say about you? So once again, this American Indian saying, if you pollute your own bed, and then lie in it, what does that say about you? So, which means, dugyot ka. Which means, hindi ka malinis. Which means, sinira mo. Dinagdagan yung pagsira ang environment. Okay? Then, we need to have a sense of moral responsibility. We have a social responsibility. We have also a moral responsibility. When you talk about morality, di ba? Morality, it talks about the goodness and badness of one's action. But ang panawagan, do good and avoid evil. Do good to the environment. Do not cut trees, but you have to plant trees. Do not throw everywhere your garbage or basura, but to a proper disposal. Then, remember, sinabi natin, the R's, the 3 R's, may 4 R's na. Reuse, recycle, ano pa? Repair, then, maaring refill. Sa peace and development, marami yung R, not only 3. Reuse, recycle, and ano yung isa? Alam niyo yan. Then, we need a value system to act now to save the planet for the future. Value system. That's why this subject is values education. And we know a lot of values, but we need sa atin our values na hindi natin masira ang ating environment. We have to act now to save our planet for the future. Not our future, mamamatay natin, but the future of our children's or grandchildren. Then, if we destroy our own environment, we are acting against God and ourselves. I think walang mag-disagree dyan. If we destroy our own environment, we are acting against God and ourselves. We are not spiritual if we destroy our environment. But remember, we have the body and the soul. The soul is spiritual. We have to take care. But pag hindi ka rin nagpakialam, especially to God's creation, parang hindi na tayo spiritual. Para ka ng atheist na hindi naniwala na everything is by chance, your body mamatay ka, tapon lang. Okay? Then, to have a spirit is to show compassion for living things, and that includes the world. Once again, to have a spirit is to show compassion for the living things, and that includes the world. Living things, that includes the human being. Kaya nga, our God is the most merciful, the most compassionate God. So as believer, we have to apply that one, not only to ourselves, but also to include the world, the living things. That's why every time we pray, God the most merciful, the most compassionate. Pareho tayo Christians and Muslims. That's why kayo mga Muslim, in your Al-Fatiha, Bismillah Rahman Rahim, kita niyo, God is the most merciful, the most compassionate. So yun yung panawagan. So to have a spirit is to show compassion for others, for living things, that also include the worlds and God's creation. So there is a real danger that we might get this wrong and destroy ourselves. So yan, may danger din yan. Okay? Hindi lang sinasabi natin, anong din niya, bahala na si God. No. As believer, hindi bahala si God. We have to act. We have to do something to save the environment, the precious planet that God has given to us. Take note. Then, it's more important to enjoy life, to worry about the world's resources. Ayun, ang problema sa mga tao. Enjoy lang tayo kahit anong mayroon, sa happy-happy. Kaya nga may mga kalukuhan na gawin natin. You have to eat, drink, and be merry because tomorrow we will die. Parang nothing lang. Wala lang. Kaya sinasabi to, how selfish would that be? Would that attitude be? Very selfish. Para lang sa kanya. Then, the world would be destroyed for our pleasure. The creation would die out and human beings would be no more. Kaya nga, be responsible of our action. So what we need, siguro conservation. Kita ninyo, pag wala yung conservation na yan, mawala na yan lahat. Yang nakita nyong frog na yan, yang hayop na yan, wala man sa Pilipinas, pero makikita natin, yan nakikita ninyo sa mga picture. Kahit na picture, yan, alam na alam natin yan. Pag sirang-sira ng environment, saan na sila mamuhay? Saan na sila titira? Okay? Ayan. Wala nang mga kahoy. Yung owl na yan, saan na yan? Itong hayop na isa, saan yan pupunta? Lalo na yan, mga ibon, mga agila. Then, our wonderful earth. So, may mga photographs dito. Yan, na-appreciate natin yan. Okay. Pag sira na, mawala na din yan. And I think, some of you, napuntahan ninyo yung asik-asik sa Alamada, then you appreciate God's wonder, God's creation. Kasi bago lang man yan, di ba? Biglang ulan-ulan, then may nahulog na tubig. Ngayon, tuloy-tuloy. Naging asik-asik falls. Okay. Sa atin yun. Pero yung nakita nyo sa picture, sa ibang bansa yon. Ayan. Kahoy. Pag wala na yan, saan na mangingitlog yung mga pispis, ang mga ibon? Wala nang madadapuan. Yan. Sa ibang bansa din yan. Yung nature na yan, yung wonder na yan, pag masira environment, wala, sira din yan. Hulugan niya ng bomba, mawala din yan. Ayan. I think that's in Japan. The awe and wonder of the creation. Ayan. Yan. I think, kahit na picture, we appreciate. What about that? Wow, mapapawaw ka. Parang sa pau, no? Mapapawaw ka sa pau. Pero with God's creation, sana mapapawaw tayo. Pero mawala na yan, wala nang wow. Now, the creation is now in a grave danger. I think you would agree with that. Mankind have treated the natural resources with disregard. And that's true. Ignorance of what stewardship means has led to the world facing catastrophic problem. So, problema talaga. If mankind was responsible, the world have learned how to coexist with nature. Kung responsable lang ang tao. Then, since that cooperation with nature was lacking, the earth faces uncertain future. Totoo yan. Okay? Then, since that cooperation with nature was lacking, yes, sanabi na natin din, deforestation, famine, weather changes, pollution, and poisoning now have caused the polar caps to melt. Alam niyo yan. Then, the ozone layer to open. Kaya nga, sobrang init na ngayon. The skin cancer to increase. Marami yan. And the loss of habitat, wala nang matitirahan yung ating ibang nilalang, mga hayop. This is, in turn, has led to the extinction of the diverse creatures. So, mawawala na sila. Extinct na sila. Then, the future is about responsibility and recycling. So, ito na yung isang recycling. Once again, the future is about responsibility and recycling. It is about conservation, all. Ayun, my read words are excellence. Then, according to Christianity, balik tayo sa Christianity, God created man in His image to take responsibility for the creation. The idea of stewardship is expressed in the story of Adam and Eve. When they fell from grace, they showed how far people were from the ideal that God expected. In the Bible, especially to the Christians, there is an evidence that God wants mankind to love and take care of the creation. For us, as member of the Roman Catholic Church, we made that statement about the creation during those times, 1988. I was still in college during those times. They said that the earth and all life on it is a gift from God given to mankind. Share and develop, not to dominate and exploit. Again, not to dominate and exploit. They felt that our actions have consequences for the rights of others and for the resources of the earth. The goods of the earth and the beauties of nature are to be enjoyed and celebrated as well as consumed. We have the responsibility to create a balanced policy between consumption and conservation. We must consider the welfare of the future generation in our planning for and the utilization of the earth's resources. So yun yung dapat gawin natin na action. The World Council of Churches has said, the World Council of Churches, not only the Catholic Church but the other churches, the Protestant churches, the other denominations, they said that the dignity of nature of creation as creation needs to be bound up with our responsibility for the preservation of life. Once again, ito yung panawagan sa grupo ng mga Kristiyanuhan. The dignity of nature as creation needs to be bound up with our responsibility for the future, for the preservation of life. And not only the world churches. And I think may mga grupo din ng mga Muslim na nanawagan din na we have to take care of our environment or to God's creation. So look at the drawing. Our world is so beautiful, precious and valuable for our own enjoyment. But how can we be so utterly thoughtless and allow it to be destroyed? Buti na lang si Duterte, saludo din tayo sa kuan. Yung paliguan, Boracay, ang dumi-dumi noon because of the industries, sirang-sira ang dagat. Pero ngayon, at least, natulungan. So, pwede palang gawin ng tao. Okay? Then, we should be able to see the spiritual value in appreciating and conserving the exquisite beauty of the planet for the next generation. If we do not do them, what will be the future entails? The answer is to that might be too horrible to contemplate. Okay? So with that, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you, and I hope you learn something and be responsible. For your assignment, you have to write a reflection about this topic, especially being responsible towards God's creation. So, thank you very much. I hope once again you learned something. God bless you all. Dalaygon ang Diyos.